Hello, and thanks for downloading the Sherlock Quick Sizer. This is Eric Vallo of VV Technologies. I am Chief Architect and leader of the band of Merry Misfits. We brought you the Sherlock Quick Sizer from the inspiration of Sherlock. Sherlock is a great technology for helping administrators understand what's happening within their business object system, for developers to understand the content makeup and the impacts of change and how that affects content within the environment, and be able to keep users informed of how those changes might impact what's happening. And competency centers to understand what do we have in our system, how is it being utilized, how is our adoption, and how do we create enterprise content for the masses that makes sense. So the Sherlock Quick Sizer, born of the idea that Sherlock's a great tool, but how can we effectively use it to help you manage and size your SAP Business Objects BI4 environments? If you've not heard of the SAP Quick Sizers, it's really a tool that is great if you know some facts in telling you how many SAPs you need to size your environment. And if you haven't seen the video that my pal Greg Meyer shot over at the Diversified Semantic Layer, I highly encourage you go learn more about the Quick Sizer. But the Sherlock Quick Sizer, it should be your first step. You find out now, and it's a free tool, hopefully, that you realize that will ultimately tell you, what do I really need to tell the SAP Quick Sizer I need for my business objects environment. So let's start out with an installation steps. I'm going to run the Quick Sizer installer. Yes, thank you, Internet Explorer. No, it's safe. We're going to walk through our setup and acknowledge the license agreement and accept that guy. And now I'm going to simply choose where I want it to deploy the Sherlock Quick Sizer. Now, the Sherlock Quick Sizer out of the box includes the Java runtime environment, the necessary libraries from business objects for your XIR2 or your XI31 systems, as well as the requisite database jar files you will need to actually read from your auditor database. That was really it. That was pretty zippy. So as I walk over to the C drive where that was installed, I do need to do just a wee bit of configuration to make sure things are going to work right. And I'm going to walk into the Sherlock QS folder inside of my C Sherlock QS location. Now here, there are two supported databases today for Auditor, Oracle and SQL Server. And I'm going to start with an example that looks like Oracle and rename that guy to audit.xml, because that's what we're going to use to drive our application. Alright, so I'm going to use my favorite text editor on the planet, Notepad++. And we're going to start hacking up this file a little bit so that it'll be configured to run on my system. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to tell our XML file what database we're actually going to run this guy against. I'm going to go ahead and let it know that it should run against Oracle. And I'm going to give it my auditor schema owner, whatever that might be. And let's just go with the assumption that we've called him auditor, with the super secret password of Desky. I'm sure yours is probably the same. The database name, we want that to reflect your SID, so some auditor SID, whatever you got on Oracle. The host name is going to be some database. Maybe that needs to be IP address if you don't think DNS works correctly. Whatever you've got it set to reflect as in TNS, in Oracle's case anyway. The port number, generally 1521. The default, but that results might vary. And then again, the database SID from up above. Now, you'll note in the file system section there are a few paths. If you just took the default paths with Sherlock, no problem. You've already got it and you're ready to go. But if you alter those paths, maybe you installed it to D or E or whatever, or changed it from the Sherlock default directory to something else, you want to alter that path here as well. Next, in the Business Objects XML node, we're simply going to give it a CMS name. So some CMS. If you have that CMS running on a port other than the default of 6400, specify it here. If you never change that port number, leave it blank, or not leave it blank, but omit the colon in the port number and you'll be good to go. So now make sure the Sherlock Quick Sizer is equipped to run with elevated privileges. Administrator is your safest bet. It's going to be able to talk to all CMS objects that way, or create a new user account that runs as administrator so that you can make sure you get everything indexed in this pool. Also, give the administrator user to business objects your administrator password so he can log in. The next section, user input, that might look a little weird. That's not very business objects-y, but if you paid attention to Greg's Quick Sizer video, you know that the work days and the work hours per day are pieces of data that the Quick Sizer is looking for at SAP. So we do want to go ahead and give those. Those are just going to be constants that we assume that you'll give to the Quick Sizer when all is said and done. Last but not least is the email node. Now, you have the option of letting the Sherlock Quick Sizer let you know as soon as the data pool is done. And it'll do so by sending an SMTP message directly from the process. So you might have already configured SMTP for business objects. If so, just use the same address and server config, or if you're going to cheat and use something like Google Mail or whatever, specify these properties here. So I'm going to make this come from Eric at ebtechnologies.com, and for fun I'm going to send it to the Pope at ebtechnologies.com. He hangs out here sometimes. And we're going to go on a port number. I can omit this. We'll use the default port of 25. Otherwise, if I need to go to a different port for security, whatever, I can send it to port 465 like Google Mail actually uses for SSL. If I want to specify security also, SSL or TLS, I can specify that here. The server name. So this might be SMTP at yourserver.com. I don't know, but you'll want to check with your mail admin or look and see how you've got business objects configured. And if you have to supply authentication here, fill it in. Otherwise, leave it blank and let it rip. I promise if you try and send through ebtechnologies.com, your request will be summarily dismissed. So that said, save your audit XML file, close it, and we have one more configuration step to make sure that everything is ready to go to invoke this Java program. Now, being a Java program, we have to invoke it with the JRE that we've bundled up with the Sherlock Quick Sizer. To make sure we do that, we're going to edit Sherlock.bat, again with the handy dandy Notepad++. Use whatever you like, but there's just a few paths in here that use C:. Again, if you took the default install paths, C:/ is ready to go. If you've installed it someplace else, do a global find and replace on C:, change it to wherever you put it, and save this file. That's the only change you'll have to make. I'm going to close my files, and now I am set to run the Sherlock Quick Sizer. Alright, now with our files configured, we are ready to simply double click on the file and launch it. And it's off. It's running in the command window, and it's talking to the business object CMS, and it's talking to the auditor database should you have actually configured it. And it's rolling it up into a nice little file that it's going to then email to you if you configured it, and drop it in this local file system here, which I'll show you in just a second, as soon as it finishes running the Quick Sizer tool. Now, you might be worried about performance and how it might be impacting your environment. We've certainly written Sherlock in such a way that it doesn't show up as a blip on the radar. Our goal was to make it perform as smoothly as we can without taking away resources from your business objects environment. So that's it. We got a log file that would throw any errors, and I know there are none. If you didn't configure it for email, this is where you're going to go to get your Quick Sizer output and the XML file that you can use to come back and upload to ebtechnologies.com. So if we take a quick look at that output, fire it open in Notepad++, we've got a nice set of outputs that are all nicely lined up and ready to go, and to go feed into the Sherlock Quick Sizer at ebtechnologies.com. So that's it. I'm going to turn you over to Greg in the next video, and he's going to walk you through the utilization of the dashboard and how to make sense of all this data.